We have the state auditor's office starting off the morning, and we have Megan McFarlane, Jenny Waltman, and Joanna Bailey joining us virtually. Megan has been with SAO since 1997. She's an assistant audit manager with Team Port Orchard, and she is the subject matter specialist for conservation districts. She's been serving in this role since 2016. And then Jenny Waltman is the program manager for conservation district, serving in that role since 2014. She's the audit manager for Team Tri-Cities. And then finally we have Joanna Bailey, who is a lean specialist for SAO Center for Government Innovation. She specializes in helping local governments apply lean methodology to make their workflow processes more effective, efficient, and customer focused. Joanna holds a black belt certification in Lean Six Sigma from the University of Washington, Tacoma. So welcome, ladies. We appreciate you for being here, and take it away. Was my volume okay, Megan?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you all. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, all right. Corey, thank you so much for the introduction. We really appreciate that. And good morning, all. Are you ready to start? Do you have your cup of coffee or some tea or soda or energy drink? Anything with caffeine, you know how they say the early bird gets the worm? Well, I say for me, the early bird gets caffeine. Anyways, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to join you today and be part of your conference. I'm Jeannie. I'm the statewide program manager for Conservation District. And with me today is Megan, and she's our statewide subject matter expert. And today we will be providing you with a presentation, and Megan and I have been doing this for a few years now. And as Corey mentioned, we have some limited time. So if you have any questions, please include them in the chat box. And if we have time at the end, we'll try and answer some of those. If not, we'll get back to you, and we'll be monitoring the chat box for any questions. And we're really excited to be here and share information with you today. We have two sessions, and Megan and I will talk about the internal control section, and then Joanna from the center, she will talk a little bit about the center and all of the resources that they have. So we'll go ahead and go into the next slide, please. Megan, thank you. So, what will you learn today? Well, Megan and I will be discussing the importance of internal controls, especially for small organizations such as yours, Conservation District, because you're tasked with performing the majority of the accounting functions and transactions, and sometimes it's really hard to implement internal control. I will also cover some internal control basics and how this ties into preventing fraud. We plan to focus on cash handling procedures and disbursements because these are the main sources of activity that you perform. And last, we'll provide you with some resources and ideas and further information on how to implement internal control and policies and procedures and segregation of duty. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's talk about why we should spend time on developing really strong internal control and why they're so important. Well, here's what the experts have to say. So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, they're the leading provider of providing training on fraud and education. And the association has more than 80,000 members in over 180 countries. So every 2 years, they do a global study and they talk about how fraud's committed, how it's detected, and how you can reduce it from occurring. And the most recent report in 2020, it shows that over 50% of the frauds occur because of internal control weaknesses. And basically having no internal controls account for all of these frauds. And usually it also happens when there's no review by management or nobody's involved in the process. And really having strong internal control, it helps fraud from occurring. And when you have strong internal controls, the fraud that are detected, they're detected 50% faster, and the losses were 50% smaller. And some of the most effective internal controls include having formal written policy and doing internal or surprise audit and having management review the activity. And it'll be interesting to note that frauds are detected by employees, 50% of the fraud. And then about 20% of those are detected by customers. And with your organizations, or really small organizations, a lot of times they rely on, external audits to catch the fraud, such as maybe our office. But it might be interesting to know that only 5% are detected using this method. So that's why it's so important to have internal controls in your own organization, and that you have a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up if maybe something doesn't quite look right. So you may have seen this before. This is the fraud triangle, and there's three things that have to be present for fraud to occur. The first thing is opportunity. Is there an opportunity? And usually when there's no internal controls, there might be opportunity to maybe commit fraud. The second thing is there a pressure? Is there a motivation or a need? Maybe you have a job loss, or medical bills need to be paid, or you have a certain lifestyle, or something major has happened in your life and you need funds. So there's that pressure to maybe have some fun. And then the last thing is rationalizing that. Why is it okay for me to do this? You have to justify that in your mind. Maybe I should have gotten a promotion, or I've been working really hard. I've been with them many years. I deserve this, or I would get paid more in the private sector, or it's just a loan. I'm going to pay it back. So you're rationalizing it. And of this fraud triangle, the area that you have the most control over is opportunity. And once you take away that opportunity, it makes it much harder for fraud to happen. And this breaks that triangle. So talking a little bit about maybe some warning signs that you might see that fraud might be occurring, and some weaknesses. So not having segregation of duties, you have one person that's performing all functions of any type of transaction. Maybe they're receiving in the money, they're recording the funds, they're taking the money to the bank, they're doing the reconciliation, and then nobody else is looking at it. And so, and that makes it really hard when you may not have the ability to segregate some of those duties and have stronger internal control. Another thing is sometimes there's no review at all. Maybe management or even your governing body isn't reviewing anything. And then another area might be there's no supporting records. There's no support for the receipt, or invoices, or time card, or maybe the bank statements aren't around. Those are missing. Maybe also you might have a process where you're doing things on a consistent basis, such as depositing weekly or daily. Maybe you're processing checks twice a month. If any of those regular processes change, maybe you're not depositing weekly, maybe it's once a month, or you're cutting checks more than you normally would be. That might be an indicator that something could be going on. And the other thing, the last area, is if there's a lot of adjustments going on, maybe cash receipting adjustment, a lot of voiding checks, things like that could be a warning sign. And then one area some people don't think about is using the QuickBooks program. While it's a really good, simple accounting system for a small organization, it doesn't have a solid cutoff. And so what does that mean? That means that you can go back and you can like change the information, and that information may not line up with what is really happening, which is on the bank statement. So it's so important to take a look at those bank statements and make sure everything on there looks okay, and that ties back to your QuickBooks report. So these are some areas to think about where there could maybe be a potential that something is going on. And so your goal of your internal control system is having effective internal control. And these effective internal controls will provide the following benefits for you. They protect you. Yes, you, and you may not think about that. Well, you know, how does that protect me? Well, if you think about it, if you have strong internal controls, it prevents fraud from occurring, but also just as important, it eliminates you from being a suspect if fraud did occur. So having internal controls protects you. The other thing it does is it helps safeguard resources, and it helps identify fraud quicker and identify the loss and the amount and who's responsible for that loss. So now that I've provided you with why internal controls are so important, I'm going to hand this over to Megan, and she will talk about some internal control basics and specific things for cash receipting and disbursement.
Thank you, Jenny. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay there. So yeah, strong internal control structures, they really start at the top with management. Management is responsible for designing and implementing internal controls, and this includes developing and using tools that will set expectations around the financial activities and establishing monitoring mechanisms that can be used for making sure the controls are really functioning as expected. It's important for management to be observant too. You know, get to know your employees, learn, you know, what is quote unquote the normal for them. Watching for those red flags in behavior and lifestyle changes. Jenny talked about the fraud triangle, and understanding what is normal and being observant for changes can help identify when something's changed in that fraud triangle. Are they feeling more pressure because of changes in their personal life? Or does it seem like job satisfaction level has changed? Next is to be communicative. Make sure every employee knows what your expectations are concerning accountability and ethical behavior. This can be done through required policy reviews, annual training, staff meetings. And last, basic internal control should include an active role by management. It goes beyond establishing and communicating that policy. It's important to review the financial activity regularly. You know, asking questions and asking for support and reviewing the activity to make sure it makes sense to you. In doing so, it can help identify areas where processes or internal controls need to be strengthened or maybe streamlined too. So internal controls can be broken down into two basic types of controls. We've got preventive and detective controls. And put pretty simply, preventive controls are designed to prevent irregularities or errors from happening, while the detective controls are designed to detect if they do occur. Another way to think of it is preventive controls are those proactive controls in preventing the errors, and detective controls are more reactive. Preventive controls help clearly define a process, including things like policies and training, excuse me, maybe standardized forms, reports, and also segregation of duties. That's a big control that we'll talk about this morning. They also help you demonstrate to management and the board or the public that every transaction is valid and supported. A strong internal control system will also result in strong detective controls. And these controls make sure that those processes have been set up are being followed and working as designed. The detective controls include regular monitoring of financial activity. It could include reviewing a bank reconciliation or review of cash receiving adjustment reports, or even looking at the budget to actual expenditure reports, making sure things look reasonable and in line with your expectations. So this morning, we're going to focus more on the preventive controls that can be put in place. Primary categories of preventative controls that we're going to discuss include having written policies and procedures, providing required training for all applicable employees, and then having segregation of duties. So we'll get into each of these a little bit more here. So if you've ever gone through an audit, you know auditors are always asking questions. We're always trying to understand your process or get an understanding of the internal controls that you have in place. Oftentimes we'll ask for if you have written policies and procedures. We want to know what's been communicated to employees and management. What are the expectations for how things are to be done? And good written policies and procedures, they provide that roadmap for the day-to-day operations. SAO Center for Government Innovation has created a guide for segregation of duties. That guide identifies 6 golden rules that help protect your government assets, and documenting the controls you put in place, including them in a written policy so expectations are clear to all employees and management, is golden rule number 3 on that list. So required training is another preventive control and a crucial way to communicate expectations to employees and management. It helps ensure that all employees receive the information necessary to be successful in their job. Required training on controls or having required annual policy review can be used as a tool not only to help new employees, but it also helps serve as a reminder of those proper procedures for other employees. It can also provide an opportunity for employees to discuss when actual practices might be different than the controls that management believes that are in place, and kind of creates an opportunity for improvement to controls, or maybe identifies a need to change those written procedures. The last type of preventive controls we're going to discuss this morning is segregation of duties. You know, the goal of segregating duties is to be able to create a workflow where no one person is responsible for the entire transaction from beginning to end. So ideally, you could break it down further, making sure that no one person has conflicting duties. So for example, here with the cash receipting, the same person would not be making deposits and reconciling the bank statements. So think about, you know, who's doing each of these 4 basic roles at your district. Is it all one person, maybe you, or do you have the staff available to do, you know, to have a separate person in each of these roles? You know, with the custody, it's talking about who has custody of the funds from the time they're received until the time they're deposited. Reconciliation, you know, who's reconciling those daily deposits? This person should be making sure that everything that was receipted was deposited and deposited intact or together. Recording, who's reconciling the bank account and making adjustments to the accounting records. And then lastly, authorization. Are these other steps being done by the same person that also has the authority to sign checks or transfer funds between accounts? So with a large enough staff and a strong internal control system, each of these would ideally be handled by a different person. So if I could hear you guys, if you weren't all muted there, I imagine there's probably some groans going on right now. You know, yes, the best practice is to have each of these done by a different person, but I mean, realistically, that's not the case a lot of times, especially due to staffing and you know, districts are generally pretty small operations. So a lot of times you might have 1 or 2 people that are doing all these things. And that's where compensating controls really are important to help strengthen what controls you can put in place. So let's think about something as simple as opening the mail. You know, thinking about during the plant sales or tree sales, you know, do you receive orders and payments through the mail? It might not be as big of a risk as it used to be in the past, but I think some districts are still processing orders this way. You might also receive other infrequent payments or maybe donations through the mail as well. You know, best practice is to have 2 people open the mail and log the payments received, but again, it's not always practical. So there's a few compensating controls that you could put in place. You know, having the person that opens the mail do it in a supervised area, ensuring that any payments received are immediately endorsed for deposit. You could put in controls to review those infrequent or unexpected revenue streams. Are they in line with what you might expect or what you typically get year to year? If you have a lot of payments come in regularly, you could contract with a third party to process those payments. Or maybe the most practical is to periodically compare the bank validated deposit slips with the cash receipts and confirm what was receipted was deposited and posted in your accounting system, and that cash and check composition agrees. So we'll take a look at a couple of examples here when those controls aren't in place. Commingling receipts from more than one day or location, or even holding them in a safe overnight, it gives a fraudster more funds to play with. If you add to this storing funds in locations that aren't secure, maybe like that top desk drawer or the unlocked cash bag that sits out, unlimited access to a vault or a safe, or maybe the safe isn't kept locked during the day. All of this provides unnecessary opportunities for fraud schemes to happen. Fraud schemes like cash for check substitutions. In this fraud scheme, the perpetrator uses checks that are received many times from those unusual or infrequent revenue sources and uses them to cover cash that's then taken from deposits. A couple examples to share with you. Cowlitz County several years ago, we found that 12 of 72 collection agency checks totaling over $10,000 were deposited, but there was no receipts written for the checks. So the checks had been included in the deposit to conceal cash that was taken. That cash that was taken was receipted, but it was receipted for those other sources. So in this case, the employee had complete access to key systems, including cash receipting. They did the bank deposits, and they had access to do account adjustments. And there was no independent monitoring of cash and check composition between the receipts and deposits. And then one other example, City of Wapato in 2019, we issued a fraud report reporting just over $308,000 had been misappropriated. About $304,000 of that was the misappropriation was assigned. The loss was assigned by the former deputy clerk treasurer. 291,000 of that was from business and occupation tax check payments that were received from businesses. Again, they had been deposited but not receipted, and those checks were deposited, so the business didn't question it. But they were included in the deposits to cover theft of cash received from other sources that were receipted. So in total, the bank deposit amount agreed to the amount receipted, but the composition was wrong. Again, this is another situation, where that trusted employee had too many conflicting responsibilities. The city didn't have adequate compensating controls in this case. The deputy clerk treasurer handled both cash receipting and preparing the bank deposits, and no one at the city was monitoring those business and occupation tax payments to make sure that they were received and that they were accurately receipted. So in these cases, a lot of times they have to wait, the fraudster, as we call them, has to wait until they can cover the amount of cash being taken. So you might be seeing, checks that are being deposited really late if you're looking at that. And again, looking at that composition, cash check composition would have been off. So thinking back to the fraud triangle that Jenny discussed earlier is a great example where there's too much opportunity there. If you're able to limit access to different key roles or responsibilities and having those duties segregated more, it really takes away some of that opportunity for loss to occur. So another important way to segregate duties is to limit access to disbursement and payroll system functions to minimize the risk of fraud. Only giving employees the access they need, making sure that you're reviewing user rights periodically, especially if somebody's role changes or when new hires are brought in. It's always important to use unique IDs and passwords for each employee, and don't share your passwords going back to the idea of what Jenny was talking about, this is really to protect you as well. Don't share your passwords. If a loss were to occur, having those unique IDs and passwords where you're entering those transactions will help protect yourself and other employees from having losses. Maybe somebody thinking that you're responsible for that loss. So, and then lastly, having timely patch management. It really means just making sure that your software and IT systems stay current with security features. To segregate duties over disbursement process, ideally you want to have a person independent of processing the accounts payable payments, reviewing the bank statement reconciliation. Review of the bank statements and reconciliation is really important. The activity on those statements is really what tells the story. Do the deposits align with the receipts in the accounting system? Do they align with your expectations and the budgets? If you get a copy of the cleared checks, I highly recommend taking a few minutes each month to scan through them. Make sure that the payees and the amounts are reasonable to what you would expect. Are there EFT payments? Are there other withdrawals on there that maybe aren't normal? Don't just make sure that the balance is reconciled, but actually take the time to review the activity, especially if your district is small and you aren't able to fully segregate all of the duties involved in that disbursement process. Other compensating controls segregating duties over disbursements could be to require an additional signature on checks, or maybe having one staff member that's responsible for initiating an EFT, but the district manager is responsible for processing or releasing that EFT. So a lot we threw at you, very short time. Sorry, our time is very limited today. So just want to make sure that you're aware of a couple of those resources that we had mentioned. The first one being the segregation of duties. It really does break down some of those key systems like cash receiving, payroll, and accounts payable, a few others, into some basic duties. Walks you through the risks that might exist when you're not able to fully segregate duties, talks about some of the compensating controls that you can put in place in those situations. And then it has a whole section as well of tips for how some of these suggestions can be adapted for smaller governments with limited staffing. And then there's also a cash receiving guide that is 100% devoted to cash receiving internal controls. And again, provides you tips for each critical role in that cash receiving function, from leaders to managers, supervisors, and cashiers. So all of these guides, as well as so much more, can be found on our online resource library through the Center for Government Innovation. You can access all of it for free by going to our website at sao.wa.gov. And then to the Center for Government Innovation, or you can access it directly by scanning the QR code. So, and then also lastly, just want to let you know about the center, that they recently launched its first online or on-demand course for cash handling controls. And it's great. It's available that you can take it anytime on your own schedule at your own pace. And then you can also receive continuing professional education credit, or CPE, for it if needed. So, and then last slide, and we'll make our slide deck available to you too, so that way you have this information, but just want to make sure you have our contact information. Encourage you to keep putting questions in the chat box so we can follow up with you after the conference if we don't have time today. Or you can always reach out to Jenny or myself directly if you have other questions we can help you with. So Joanna, I'm going to stop preventing so we can switch it over to your presentation. All right. Joanna, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Nope, wasn't yet.
Okay.
But now
all
I
right.
am.
All right.
All right, great. So quick tech check. Can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Corey Turntine and our state auditors, Megan and Ginny, for the opportunity to present information about the services of the Center for Government Innovation. Megan and Ginny both did a great job talking about some of those services. This morning, I'll provide a brief overview of how the center is connected to the state auditor's office before diving into what lean methodology is and how it can work for you. I understand there is some interest among conservation districts to learn about lean, and I know on some of your long-range plans, there is a desire to standardize operations to make sure you're functioning as efficiently and effectively as possible. So this could be a great tool for you in your district. And then lastly, we'll wrap up time with a short discussion about the other free services offered by the center. So to fulfill its mission, the state auditor's office is divided into two overarching branches. And our largest is the auditing services for state and local agencies. And you just heard about that branch. The other branch of service is the non-auditing side. And this is where the Center for Government Innovation lives. Our mission is to work independently from the audit side to provide free training and support to help agencies gain clarity, to make improvements that strengthen their operational efficiency, to deliver higher value service to communities. We proudly serve 2,000 local governments across the state, which includes 37 different types of governments, from conservation districts to cities and counties, to ports, to library districts, to name a few. As you heard Megan say, our website is located at sao.wa.gov. Now would be a great time to write this website down, add it to as a favorite bookmark to your computer. Notice in the middle tab at the top that reads Improving Government. This is where the Center for Government Innovation is. When you click on Improving Government tab, on the Improving Government tab, you'll see colored tiles here that correspond to the services offered by the center. So let's click here to learn more about lean services. Here is our lean service homepage. Click here to schedule your lean experience today. It's a one click. When a request for service comes in, our first step is to meet with you to understand your specific situation and needs. While I've heard all 45 conservation districts can be considered parts of a whole family, I've also learned that each of you operate very independently and differently from each other. While some of you have operational similarities, for example, each of you voucher out of the state commission in the same way, how you manage grants internally within your district is unique. And while each of you submit a work plan, a budget, and a long-range plan to the state commission, there is not commonality in how you compile that work or the software you use to do your daily work. We see operational differences in all of the clients we serve. So rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach to providing service, we believe the center's value comes from applying our expertise to your unique situation. By tailoring our assistance to your district's unique needs, we provide you with the most relevant assistance possible. So let's talk about lean. Lean methodology is a structured, holistic approach to improvement that focuses on reducing unnecessary effort in workflow processes to increase value for internal and external customers. Lean follows a practical approach to problem solving by using a set of principles and tools to apply your existing knowledge and everyday thinking in a structured and uncommon way to better support your daily work. In Lean, we start small and we go slow to go fast, meaning we take the time up front to understand the problem before we jump to solutions. And we focus on generating small wins for teams to build a district's capacity to accomplish the bigger successes and larger goals in the long term. Lean methodology centers on improving workflow processes. So to understand why, let's illustrate the connection between process and your daily work. We start with input. This is what you need to do your work. Input could be the grant agreement or program information that provides allowable costs and services funded by the grant program. Process is what you do with the input, what steps you follow to do your work. This could be steps towards gathering all the supporting information to complete the state's commission's voucher support and payment request forms. And lastly, output is what you give to someone else. It's your work, your deliverable to the next person. For example, this could be the completed and submitted voucher and payment request forms. In this workflow cycle, your output becomes someone else's input, and the process is essentially the engine used to produce the work. So you can see why having a broken or inefficient engine could make your work more difficult and take longer than need be. The processes we use to do our work directly impact how effectively we are able to complete our tasks. In a perfect world, workflow processes we create and use would be simple and straightforward, something that might look like this. A process can be a simple one-person, few-step process, or it could be a larger multi-team, many-step process. For example, think about how your district onboards new employees, or collects and compiles grant documentation, or develops governance policies. In each of these examples, you follow a process to get the job done. Sometimes this is a written process, but other times the process hasn't been formalized in writing. It's in your head or it's passed verbally from one to another. But over time, or perhaps quite suddenly during a surge of rapid organizational growth, processes that started out straightforward can look and feel like this. The undesired outcome is a process that takes longer to follow, it's frustrating to use, and it doesn't produce optimal results consistently. Updating your workflow processes to match your new reality, your new needs, can help ease those growing pains and help staff complete their work more efficiently and effectively. And to be clear, for all good reasons, an excellent process can deteriorate. It's what happens when change outpaces process. How well our processes work for us can make or break our ability to do good work easily. So through clarity of process, Lean helps teams move away from because we've always done it this way to discover and champion new ways to evolve and improve operations. Lean helps agencies strategize, adapt, and improve their service value by helping to make your work visible. And we'll talk about the importance of this later on. By helping you use qualitative and quantitative data to inform decisions, such as revisions to policies or forms, and to validate the use of resources, such as existing software or maybe new software licenses. These advantages work together to help teams visualize how to realign resources to provide more efficient, effective service. Lean also helps teams measure and report the results of their activities in relation to established goals. Lean's methodology is customizable and scalable to meet you where you're at, whether you're a novice or an expert at continuous improvement. In Lean, we create improvement by eliminating unnecessary effort. So here are some common ways unnecessary effort shows up in a process. Rework. This is redoing work that was not done accurately or completely the first time. Overproduction, which means giving the customer or staff more than what they need or before they need it. Waiting. This is waiting for someone else to do their work before your work can move forward. Motion. This is unnecessary motion by people. This could be a duplication of work, such as manual data entry in multiple places, or creating and storing physical copies of documents when digital ones already exist. And underutilized potential. This is not fully utilizing people's talents, skills, or knowledge, or not using the software to the level you've paid for. The cost of unnecessary effort is wasted time and money, two precious resources that always seem to be in short supply. So in Lean, we often use a tool called a process map to help teams make their work visible, to understand the steps in their current process. And we do this because you have to know where you are before you can design a plan for getting where you want to go. As the picture on the slide shows, a process map uses colored sticky notes to show the main steps of a process, and the map is built by the people who know the work best, the people who do the work. Sometimes the purpose of mapping is to focus on the handoffs between people doing the work. And other times, the important element is the time spent doing the task itself or the time spent waiting for the next task in the process to start. In all cases, once work is visible, the team can determine which steps are critical to keep and which steps are unnecessary and can be removed. To demonstrate the value of a process map, I'm actually going to share my process of making my morning coffee with you as an example. So the first step is I turn the coffee maker on. Then I wait for the water to heat. I walk across the kitchen to get the cup from the cupboard. I put the cup and my coffee pod in the maker. I start the brew. I wait for the brew to finish. I walk to the fridge to get my cream. I add the cream to the coffee. I stir it to mix it, and then I can drink my coffee. The more steps there are in a process, the more value is diluted before it reaches the customer. In this example, I'm the customer, and the value that I define is the amount of time it takes before I can drink my coffee. The current runtime of this process is 4 minutes from start to finish. And the purpose of mapping this process is to see if I can shorten the runtime so I can drink my coffee sooner. Once key steps are visible, I evaluate the efficiency of the process using these questions. Are all steps necessary? Can some steps be completed together simultaneously? Is there a better way to sequence these steps? I now see there are 2 steps just spent waiting. There are 2 steps that involve some walking, so that's motion, and 1 step that could be sequenced earlier and combined with another step. Items circled in red represent unnecessary work to some degree and are therefore ripe for improvement. So here are the improvements I trialed. First, I moved my cups closer to the coffee maker, and I got my cup from the cupboard while the water was heating. Doing both steps at the same time reduced the amount of waiting, and it kept the process moving. Then I resequenced the step of adding cream to the empty cup before I brewed the coffee. As the coffee brewed, it automatically mixed with the cream, which eliminated the need to stir the coffee at all. Trialing these simple ideas gave me a shorter runtime of 3 minutes for a 25% improvement in performance. So this demonstration shows the direct connection between making work visible and improving outcomes. Aha moments are created as everyone understands how their work impacts the work the next person does, and they're able to define what that impact is. Understanding the connection between steps, between people, is a cornerstone concept of Lean methodology. There are 3 main parts of a Lean project cycle. First, the district identifies a process for improvement. Second, a team is formed and leadership sets aside time for the team to do the project. Third, the team moves through the PDCA phases of an active project. And as you can see on the slide, PDCA stands for plan, do, check, and adjust. So let's talk about what occurs during these phases. The plan phase is where the center lean facilitators spend our time helping teams. Notice this is the largest phase of the cycle, and this is because, again, in lean, we take the time in the beginning to help you understand the root of the problem before identifying what specific changes will deliver improvement. The work that occurs in the plan phase includes explaining the problem, defining your goals, understanding what's currently happening, identifying, reducing, or eliminating unnecessary effort, and then determining your improvement recommendations. In the do phase, the team would trial their improvement and monitor their results to see if the changes really do generate improvements. In the check phase, the team checks for any unforeseen consequences and measures progress against goals. And in the adjust phase, teams make final adjustments and standardize the new process. Lean is scalable, and going through the PDCA cycle doesn't have to be a long process. A process impacting multiple districts is more complex, and it might take more time to work through than an individual process that just impacts one district or a smaller team within that district. Lean facilitators can help you right-size your project for your team. If a large project is what's needed, facilitators can help you create a plan for phased work as you get a feel for how lean works for you. And remember, we go slow in the beginning to go fast later on. The point is, lean is relevant for every person and every process because you can scale it to the project at hand. In lean, improvements are made by identifying and solving problems at the root cause level. To do this, we use a tool called the 5 Whys, and we drill down to the root of the problem to help teams focus on eliminating problems at the source rather than fixing problems at the surface. To showcase lean's effectiveness for small teams, here's a case study from Garfield County. The district consisted of 1 director, 1 business manager, and 1 bookkeeper. The processes to be improved were payroll and accounts payable reconciliation, and their goals were to reduce time to transition to paperless or paper-light record keeping. This department had no formal lean training, but had created their own financial handbook. Over the course of 1.5 days, lean facilitators helped the team create a process map to understand their work, review voucher reconciliation steps, and identify that unnecessary effort, which was the form of redundant manual entry and redundant printing, copying, and filing of physical documents. As the team moved through their improvements, lean facilitators provided post-event support in the form of 2 additional on-site days and 1 wrap-up conference call. The team implemented the following improvements. They made simple changes to spreadsheets, including adding auto-population formatting, reordering their columns, and removing data that was collected but never used. They stopped making 2 copies of vouchers and filing hard copies, and they automated inventory and updated their timesheet process for seasonal employees. The results, from 3.5 days of facilitated support, the team created improvements that saved 9.15 weeks of time that year. It also eliminated multiple filing cabinets too. So this case study illustrates that improvement work doesn't have to be time intensive to generate wins. So I'm going to transition away from lean to talk about the other services offered by the center. From an entire online resource library of best practices to cybersecurity resources, team building workshops, to financial intelligence tools, we offer these services at no cost. The center's new cyber checkups provides a fast, free, and independent assessment of your district's vulnerability to common threats. A cyber checkup will help you understand cybersecurity safeguards and why they're important, identify cybersecurity gaps and prioritize improvements, and begin building a cybersecurity program if you don't have one already. It also helps you connect to free and low-cost resources to improve your cyber health. The Center for Government Innovation offers engaging and interactive team building workshops to help teams discover their natural strengths and talents in a way that brings out everyone's best contribution. By leveraging everyone's strengths, teams can build more trust, work more collaboratively, and increase work satisfaction. These workshops can be customized to fit your team's needs and time frame. A typical workshop can be done on site at your agency in 3 hours. And FIT, and Megan mentioned FIT, FIT was created to give local governments the ability to monitor their financial information using standardized guidelines and trend analysis. Each district can see their financial health indicators and even compare their financial information to their peer conservation districts. If you aren't familiar with FIT and have specific questions related to your unique needs, please do contact the center for a free personal training session. We're happy to walk you through the tools step by step or answer questions. And we'll work with one person or a larger group of district employees. Exciting new features are coming to FIT in July. The platform is in the process of being modernized with a new, more user-friendly menu system and available for use on small handheld devices. Subscribing to the SAO newsletter is the best way to receive the latest information affecting your district. Not only do you get notifications of the latest information from SAO, but we comb the websites and newsletter from other reputable resources that serve local governments. We do all the searching for you. It's quick and easy to sign up. You can take a picture of the QR code with your phone and sign up with 5 easy pieces of information. Today, I've shared information about no-cost services offered by the center, and we've taken a deeper dive into Lean to show you how you can use Lean to create improvements in your districts. If I've piqued your interest and you'd like to discuss how the center can serve you best, please reach out to us using the phone number or email listed on this slide. I'd like to close by extending kudos to each of you. In talking with staff from Palouse Conservation District, I understand that as a whole, districts have developed a practice of knowledge sharing with each other. Whether using the shared Google Drive to learn about new MRSC guidelines or networking with each other at conferences like this one, or leading learning topics at your monthly manager meetings. Sharing to learn from each other is a great practice and can save a lot of time where commonalities exist. And with that, Corey, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, Joanna, Megan, and Jenny. We appreciate your presentation today. Lots of good information, and we're bleeding into our break time, so I'm going to just let you guys go. I don't see any. I see a excellent explanation of the coffee example you gave, Joanna, but other than that, I don't see any questions. So I'll take a poll in the room and send you guys any feedback or questions that we have. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.